early hours of the 15th of April 1912, a 31-year-old woman was about to board a lifeboat on board the sinking RMS Titanic. Suddenly, she had forgotten the previous item that she left inside her cabin. She had forgotten her hat, which was a gift from her native homeland. Upon returning to the boat deck from her cabin, successfully retrieving the hat, she realised that most of the boats were gone. She then saw one of the last boats being lowered. Despite hoping not to miss it, this amazing woman jumped 15 feet from the Titanic's rope ladder to the boat, which may have been lifeboat 13, though sources differ. The woman who survived this amazing attempt was named Delia McDermott. McDermott came with 13 other members in her group, though she and 2 other ladies survived while the rest of the group perished. She and the other members are known today as the Addergoole 14. They were considered to be the largest group from Ireland to travel on board the Titanic, and tragically they would become the only group with the biggest loss of life. This is the story of the Addergoole 14. Before we begin the video, I would like to point out that we won't go through each member in full context. Not only this will take a long time to narrate and edit, but I believe the members deserve their own separate videos, which will be taken into consideration in the future. Instead, we will be looking at the town the members came from, what they got up to on board the Titanic, and the legacy they left behind. If you would like to see a video or listen to a podcast episode on the members, let the team know in the comments section down below. The history of the group begins in the town named after them, though Addergoole is considered to be a county. In fact, the 14 lived in Lahardane, which is a village in Addergoole. Lahardane is located to the west of Southern Ireland and is nearly a 4-hour drive away from the city of Belfast. Today, it is mostly remembered for 2 things: the traditional harvest festival held each year on the 15th of August, and the Addergoole 14. In Lahardane, in the early 20th century, the village, as well as many other villages in Ireland, were facing poverty and starvation. The infamous Irish potato famine, which occurred between 1845 to 1852, had a major impact in Ireland, and this became the starting point where millions of Irish citizens would emigrate to Canada and to the United States. By 1912, around 30 million Irish citizens had emigrated to Canada and to the United States. The people who emigrated would come from large families, and they would leave to seek a better life in the New World, either for employment or somewhere to live. However, some wouldn't have had enough money to return to Ireland to see friends and family, though this was very rare for those who did. One of these people was Catherine McGowan. McGowan emigrated to America from Ireland in 1888, and by 1912 she was running a boarding house in Illinois. She made 2 previous trips back to Ireland before returning to collect her niece Annie McGowan, who just lost her mother. But Annie and Catherine caught the attention of 12 more individuals who expressed their interest in joining them to move to America. The others were Delia McDermott, Anna Kelly, John Burke, Catherine Burke, Mary Burke, Patrick Canavan, Mary Canavan, James Flynn, Bridget Donoghue, Bridget Mahon, Nora Fleming, and Mary Magdalene. For the group, the plan was to leave Ireland, and by sea they would travel to America, where they would go their separate ways. Bridget Donoghue, Annie Kelly, Mary Magdalene, the Burkes, and the McGowans were planning to emigrate to Chicago. The Canavans were emigrating to Manhattan. James Flynn was emigrating to Philadelphia to join his sister. Delia McDermott was planning to travel to St. Louis to meet up with her cousin. And Bridget Mahon and Nora Fleming were emigrating to Brooklyn. After a decision had come to form, the group purchased tickets to board as third-class passengers on board the RMS Titanic, who was about to begin her maiden voyage. Purchasing separate tickets, all of the members paid between £7.15 and £15.10. It is understood that half of the members purchased their tickets with two travel agents, Thomas Darkan of Castlebar and Mrs. Walsh of Leadenhall Street. However, a strange turn of events occurred. A day before departure, when Delia McDermott was walking down on a country road with a couple of friends, she encountered a man who was dressed in black and had a premonition. The man tapped her shoulder before he said to McDermott, "There will be a tragedy, but you will be saved." He then disappeared. When McDermott mentioned him to her friends, they confessed that they didn't see him. Nevertheless, McDermott began to feel apprehensive. On the 10th of April 1912, the 14 members began their journey from Lahardane to Cove, where they were about to board the RMS Titanic. While the group said their final goodbyes, Patrick Canavan's mother gave him a gold coin that fell out of his hand and onto the floor. Canavan's mother had considered the act as a bad omen. The group then took the train from Castlebar to Cove before boarding the Titanic the following day. Life on board the Titanic for the group would have been busy and full of luxury. With the possible exception from Catherine McGowan, a few members of the Addergoole 14 would have taken in the new facilities around them. Third-class passengers would have enjoyed a high level of luxury with oak furnishings with teak furniture, a male smoking room, a large dining room, freshly prepared meals, a piano for general use in the open space, new cabins, and 2 new bathrooms. Many would have socialised with other passengers and would have made new friends. Even Nora Fleming celebrated her 22nd birthday on board, but her birthday was on the day when the group's lives changed forever. On the night of the 14th of April 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg in the middle of the North Atlantic. Many third-class passengers were asleep and were awoken by the collision. Catherine and Annie McGowan were awoken after hearing or seeing the appearance of crew members rushing around the corridors. During the sinking, Catherine and Annie McGowan managed to make their way up to the boat deck, but during the loading, aunt and niece became separated. Catherine would perish in the sinking and her body was never recovered. Tragically, Annie McGowan would survive, but she would later believe that her aunt found a lifeboat but got sucked into a whirlpool when the Titanic, in her own words, busted in half. Annie secured a spot in Lifeboat 13 along with Delia McDermott, who had landed into the boat after jumping 15 feet from the ship's rope ladder after retrieving her hat from her cabin. The ladies had a further lucky escape when the lifeboat was nearly crushed by Lifeboat 15, only to be saved at the last moment when fireman Frederick Barrett cut the ropes to release the tangled boat to lower away from Lifeboat 15. After being alerted by a steward, Anna Kelly, Mary Mangan, Mary Burke, John Burke and Catherine Burke were also separated. Mangan was never seen again, while Kelly and the Burkes made it to the boat deck. Once on deck, Catherine and Mary Burke were offered places in Lifeboat 16. When they found that John wasn't allowed to board, the women vacated the boat and allowed Kelly to take their place instead. Interestingly, Kelly gave a different account where she said that after the collision, the steward had told the panicking passengers to go back to their cabins, even though the passengers knew that they were in danger. Depending on which account is true, it's clear that the confusion below became the result of a huge loss of life for third-class passengers. Kelly also mentioned the whereabouts of Patrick Canavan and John Burke when they were last seen herding members of the group towards an iron ladder at the aft poop deck, leading them to the higher decks. Little is known about what happened to the rest of the group. Most of the bodies were either never recovered or identified. But Mary Magan's body was recovered by the ship the Mackay Bennett before it was buried at sea. In total, only 3 members of the Addergoole 14 survived. Following the disaster, Anna Kelly, Delia McDermott and Annie McGowan travelled on board the RMS Carpathia, the ship that would come to rescue Titanic's survivors. Upon arrival in New York City on the 18th of April, Annie McGowan came across a sailor who cried, "You can see the Statue of Liberty. Take a good look on the other side because you will never go back there." In response, Annie McGowan said, "You've got that right, I sure won't." This hinted that Annie McGowan promised herself to never set foot on a boat again. The women received medical attention at the St. Vincent's Hospital, remaining there for a fortnight. However, during their stay, they would receive disgusting treatment from the White Star Line when the representatives of the company came into their rooms for the women to sign papers confirming that they have agreed to settle the company with $25 for their tickets to their destination, despite their injuries and the valuables they had lost in the disaster. The company had done this to pay off the women, as well as the other third-class passengers, to keep them quiet about filing claims against the company. As a result, the women never got justice. However, there is a deeper reason for all of this, and there is a video on the White Star Line's insurance policy with the Lloyd's of London Bank on the channel. This goes into further detail of the situation the 3 women went through, and it's basically looking like behind the scenes of it all. A link to that video will be in the card above and in the description box down below. Following the disaster, the women moved on with their lives. Annie McGowan went on to have a family of her own and worked as a secretary. She never spoke about the Titanic except for her grandchildren, for their school projects, and an interview she gave for the Daily Herald in 1982, and was interviewed by her own great-granddaughter, who was a journalist with the newspaper. When the wreck was discovered in 1985, Annie McGowan, on a rare appearance, spoke out about retrieving artifacts and leaving the ship in peace. She would die in 1990. Anna Kelly would turn to religion and became a nun, taking the name of Sister Patrick Joseph Kelly. She would spend most of her life teaching schools in Chicago, Detroit, and Michigan. She died in 1969. Delia McDermott lived in New York, and later she would move to New Jersey. She would go on to marry and have 3 children. However, McDermott refused to speak about the Titanic, and her children were forbidden to ask her about the disaster. She and her family ran a boarding house for years in New Jersey, and she was a participating member of the local Roman Catholic Church in the area. McDermott died in 1959, believed to either have been aged 75 or 80. Following the disaster, the subject was forbidden to be mentioned in Lahardane. However, the subject would be brought up again. A society had been created for the town which would become the Addergoole Titanic Society. Following that, a series of memorials and events would follow. In April 2002, the Society erected a memorial in St. Patrick's Church, where today Mass would be said on the anniversary of the sinking. For the Mass on the 15th of April, the Society and the parish would begin a 45-minute commemoration walk at Murphy's Pub at 1 a.m. with an illumination of 14 lanterns to represent the Addergoole 14. The procession stops at the church where lanterns are placed on the ground beneath the Timothy bell to represent a ship's bow. Songs and stories would then run until 2:20 a.m. when the bell is rung slowly in memory of the 11 members who died, and then joyfully 3 times in celebration of the survival of Annie McGowan, Anna Kelly and Delia McDermott. Inside the church there is a stained glass window dedicated to the Addergoole 14. In the window there is an image of Kelly in lifeboat number 16 looking up at her cousin Patrick Hanavan, waving whilst holding his rosary beads. In April 2012, the Addergoole 14 Memorial Park was open to the public. Today it is a popular attraction to visit. It's where the visitors can go around the park reading the story of the Addergoole 14 whilst admiring the sculptures of the group and of the Titanic's bow. The story of the Addergoole 14 still captures the attention of Titanic historians and enthusiasts. It also continues to play a role in the history of Lahardane. If you would like to learn more about the story of the group in further detail, the History Inside a Nutshell team recommends watching the documentary Waking the Titanic. The documentary is featured on YouTube and a link to it will be left in the description box down below and in the card above. And finally, we would like to take this opportunity to dedicate this video to the members of the Addergoole 14 themselves. May they rest in peace and never be forgotten.